Hey, what's up? Welcome to Degen Ed. That's degenerative education, meaning none of this is financial advice. Just me having fun looking at charts like the chart behind me, which is of GameStop, ticker symbol GME, which closed on the day at a price of $25.46, being down 16.5% on the day. And so here in the chart, we are looking at the 30-minute candles, and we can see that there was a pretty big drawdown today. And there is some speculation that this could be because Roaring Kitty is selling some of his calls. And so, I wanted to go over basically my thought process in trying to understand why he might be doing that, if he might be exercising some of the remaining calls, and what he might be doing with the cash that he has on the side. So yeah, I'm just going to take you through my thought process, which really does come back to, the spreadsheet that I adjusted from last week, going over some speculative, assumptions in what might be going on with his portfolio and how he might be exercising his remaining calls if he has sold some. And so basically what I have here, I did go over this top portion in last week's video, and then I did add this lower portion based on the number of call contracts traded today at the $20 strike price expiring on June 21st. And so those are Roaring Kitty's calls. And so here, looking at the spreadsheet, I do have this highlighted here, and that is, showing that if he were to exercise the 120,000 calls that he has, he would need to have $240 million in cash. But he unfortunately doesn't have that. As you can see here, his cash is right around at 29 million. So he's either going to need to sell some shares to exercise calls or sell some calls to exercise the remaining calls. So I think that's what he is likely doing. And, if he does not sell any, like I said, he will need $240 million to be exercising those. And so that is just fantasy right now. He does need to be moving some things around. And with the expiration being next Friday, he needs to start moving. And so, I'm just going to go over how I got these numbers, the day's volume traded as far as the $20 strike contracts expiring next Friday on the 21st, and then also the day's bid for those contracts, and then just the average, so the average of these two numbers. So where did I get those numbers, and where did I get this average premium, which was traded for the day for those calls? And so if I do flip over to Twitter, we can see this tweet here from Ryan Rigg using data from Unusual Whales. And this is tracking the GameStop $20 calls expiring on June 21st. And so from this, we can see a number of things. One being that the average premium for these contracts for the day was $7.65. So if we do look over at that spreadsheet, that is the number that I have typed in there. And then so the day's volume, that is 93,266. If I do flip over to his tweet, we can see that that is the day's volume as well. So that is where I get that number. There's also another place I can get that number, and that is from the options table that I have over here. So looking at the June 21st expiration calls with a strike of $20 a share, we can see that the total volume is 93,266. So it's nice that I was able to kind of cross-check that number and verify that it is the correct volume for the day. So that is good. And then coming back to this, I can also look at the bid volume. So the bid, and so if I do look at the table, the bid price is the sell price. And so let's say, just hypothetically, theoretically, that Roaring Kitty was selling all of this, that all of that volume was his, or that all of the volume over the course of the day was Roaring Kitty selling. So if that is the case, then, that is why I have these two numbers here, and then here I have just calculated the average of those two numbers to just kind of get an idea of what kind of cash he'd be working with if he had sold that number of contracts. And so here, rather than just putting 0 in there, I am going to reference this cell here and then we get some numbers calculated. And so that would result, based on this average premium, in about $71 million cash raised. And so combining that with the $29 million that he already has, that would put his cash total at around $100.7 million. And then looking at that, the remaining number of calls that he would have would be 26,734. And in order to exercise those, he would need to have about $53 million. And so with the total cash that he'd have after raising some, that would be no problem. He'd still have almost 50 million on the side, so he'd be positioned really well. And his total number of shares, if those were exercised, would put him at 7,673,400 shares. And so combining the number of shares that he would get from selling these calls with the number of shares that he already has. And so that would be putting him in a pretty good position, having more shares and also still having, about $50 million to spare for buying more calls or more shares, whatever he wants to do. But I do think that is a little extreme, that all of the calls that were traded that day being Roaring Kitty selling. I think that's a little much. So, if I do adjust this sell to be not the volume for the day, but the bid volume for the day at right around 59.6 thousand. And so I do think that's also a pretty nice number too, because it does represent about half of the number of calls that he is currently holding, or at least was previously holding. And so typing that number in with the average premium, that would result in about 45.6 million cash raised, putting his total cash at around 75 million. However, with the remaining calls that he would have, around 60,000, he need to have over $120 million in order to exercise all of those calls. And so, in order to get this number of 11 million shares, again, that is kind of fantasy, because he would need to be selling more contracts in order to raise enough money to exercise them to get that many shares. And so what I feel like is kind of a reasonable estimate is just taking the average of these two numbers, and that being 76,000. And so if I adjust this cell to be referencing that one, I get some numbers that I think actually look pretty reasonable. They do seem to make sense for the most part. So having sold, let's say, 76,000 contracts, he would then raise around 58 million, and combining that with the 29 million that he has on the side, that would put him at around $87.9 million. And with the remaining number of calls that he'd have at around 43.5 thousand, the cash that he would need to exercise those is right around $87 million. And so those numbers do match up pretty well. And while it would be nice if he was doubling this number, going from 5 million to 10 million, getting to 9.355 million is pretty nice. That's a pretty nice position. However, again, though, it would be nice if he had some cash on the side to buy some more calls, be able to exercise some more positions, or, buy more shares, or, do whatever he would like. But, just breaking this down, I do think that is pretty interesting. And one thing that I do think we all should be paying attention to tomorrow is, if I do switch back over to the table here, we can see that the open interest for the day was 169,963 contracts. And with Roaring Kitty holding, or at least having previously held, 120,000, that does represent the majority of these contracts. And so, like in Ryan's tweet over here, open interest will be updated in the morning at 6:45 a.m. Eastern. So I do think that will be an interesting number to check out to see what this number has dropped to, from around 170,000 if Roaring Kitty sold about 76,000 of his contracts. That would put this number right around 100,000. So I'd be looking for that number in the morning to see where it's at, and that could suggest, what he's planning to do in the week ahead before his call options expire on the 21st. And so it'll be interesting to see if he does exercise those calls to increase his share position and, then ride the wave of that buying pressure that I think we'll see next week as he does exercise those calls. But we are just going to have to wait and see. But, those are just my thoughts. If you found them helpful, make sure you like the video, share your thoughts in the comments down below, and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks a lot for watching.